It's more like they're...
I'd like to start the board meeting at 6:41 on June 11th, 2019. Can we stand to have a pledge of allegiance, please? And a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Monica, can I have a roll call?
Ms. Martinez?
Here.
Mr. Moreno?
Here.
Mrs. Quintana?
Here.
Mr. Rolla?
Here.
Mr. Thomas?
Here.
I'd like to have a motion to approve the minutes for May 28th, 2019.
Madam Chair, I move to approve the meeting minutes of May 28th, 2019.
May I have a second?
I second.
Discussion? Seeing none? Roll call, Monica?
Ms. Martinez?
Aye.
Mr. Moreno?
Aye.
Mrs. Quintana?
Aye.
Mr. Rolla?
Aye.
Mr. Thomas?
Aye.
I'd like to have a motion to approve the agenda.
Madam Chair, I move to approve the agenda as presented.
May I have a second?
Madam Chair, I second the agenda.
Any discussion on it? Monica, roll call?
Ms. Martinez?
Aye.
Mr. Moreno?
Aye.
Mrs. Quintana?
Aye.
Mr. Rolla?
Aye.
Mr. Thomas?
Aye.
And now we're going to have recognitions and celebrations. Ms. Lopez? Or Mrs.?
Good evening, President Quintana and members of the board. Tonight, the Culturally and Linguistically Diverse Education Team has the privilege of honoring the work of our educators over the 2018-2019 school year. These educators ensured that our language learners receive the best opportunities and experiences. I have 3 groups of educators that I would like to acknowledge tonight, and it'll go really quickly because most of them are on vacation. The first group of educators implemented after-school programming for English language learners at their schools. They provided extended and personalized learning experiences. From Kearney Middle School, Dr. Bernal Piatok. Dr. Bernal is an Adams City High School graduate who began teaching ELD at KMS this school year. She took her students on field trips on the weekends to the library and the Natural History Museum. In addition to her extra time, Dr. Piatok had the highest growth of secondary ELD teachers on STAR for a secondary teacher. From Adams City Middle School, I'd like to recognize Megan Small and Rachel Coomer. Ms. Small and Ms. Coomer provided engaging and fun after-school extension activities. And from Adams City High School, Jaime Elick and Sabrina Ghetto provided their after-school extension and support for newcomers. The second group of educators demonstrated growth in Spanish literacy. I would like to recognize the K-2 bilingual teachers from DuPont and Central. This extraordinary group of educators demonstrated the highest growth in Spanish literacy. Over 50% of the K-2 students from these schools demonstrated growth in IDAL, our Spanish literacy assessment. From DuPont, Mary Fernandez. Kindergarten, Yvonne Braun. First grade, Nancy Carbajal Tinsman, and second grade, Arturo Esparza. From Central, Maribel Urbina, Maribel Urbela, Joaquin Reyes, and Juanita Dominguez. Finally, I'm very excited to honor the kindergarten team from Alsip Elementary for excellence in ELL achievement. 94% of kindergarten English language learners at Alsip reached benchmark or above in literacy, according to Dibbles. In other words, almost all of the language learners in kindergarten left this year able to read and ready for first grade. This is the highest literacy achievement in the district. These teachers are Kate Nazarinas, Dana Finch, Deborah Melvin, and I'd also like to recognize their paraprofessional, Laura Pasillas. So if all those teachers can come up, please.
Right here, you're ready. 1, 2, 3.
Next, I'd like to have the budget public hearing. Mr. Storts?
Good evening, President Quintana, distinguished members of the board. So tonight I'm going to go over a very similar presentation to what I presented 2 weeks ago in our study session, and I'll try to point out some things that have changed since then. So this first slide is showing how our beginning fund balance is changing to give us what will be our beginning fund balance heading into next year. And you see a reduction of about $3 million, which is largely attributed to funding the match on ALSUP. This slide shows you the general fund and a 5-year comparison, and how that's starting the year at about 18.1 million and then ending the year at a projected 15.2 million. So on this slide, I don't have an updated number included here for any costs related to MGT. I do want to point out that under the revenue category here for categoricals, I've increased that amount about 200,000 because we got a preliminary report on the ECA funding. So I've shown that here as increased revenue for ECA. I've also added $40,000 for the band uniforms. That was a discussion topic we had in our last meeting as a transfer from the general fund to the athletics fund, so that money is there. Then as we were kind of quality checking our work in the preliminary budget presented previously, we did identify a teacher and a 0.25 of a custodian position, which are expected to be there next year, but which we did not budget a salary for in that preliminary budget presented 2 weeks ago. So that's been added here as well, and you'll see that as an addition in salaries on the general fund. I think we also had some discussion about the $4 million, which is listed in the general fund as a reserve for insurance. And I've left that there at this point because, you know, we can look at that and get further direction from you, the board, on what you'd like to see that be as a number moving forward, be it 0 or be it 2 million. But I do want to try to make an informed decision there and get maybe some research and different perspectives on what is the right number. to have there, since just, I wasn't sure of what that number, we would want that number to be, aside from maybe we think it's not 4 million. So for now, I've left it there.
Madam Chair, that number that was in that insurance, it should be zero. As a board, we decided at the time we needed to put something in that particular category. But reality is that number is zero. So as a board, we have to decide about that $4 million, where does it go? Because it was for a specific reason why it was for insurance.
I'm just wondering, because I had a conversation with Sean before, and he was going to put about 4 million aside for, like, emergencies in case something came up.
Yeah, that could be that same
I think that's-
4 million. But what I would suggest is that we try to have that as a decision point down the road. So remember, what this 4 million is it's a restriction within the current fund balance for next year. So the budget that's been put together is a balanced budget, aside from MGT, which is largely projected to come out of reserves at this point. So, if that were to be used in some way, that would be a one-time use of funds. Certainly could be at the board's direction, but I would think at this point, a good way to move forward is to have that as a future decision which the board could make. So.
I think we should. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Storrs. On that piece, I'm just curious, I think this board would need an idea of any pending litigation against the district before I think we make any dramatic changes in reserving at least a portion of that money for unforeseen settlements.
Yeah, we could get that information, and there may be, other uses which may come up, down the line that you may want to restrict that money for. So certainly could be something we could look at all the different possible reasons why we would want to have that restricted balance there and just reallocate that after we have time to kind of make an informed decision if knowing that it should be zero related to that other reason why we put it there before. So. So this slide is just talking about the general fund revenue assumptions that are built into the budget right now. The per pupil funding increased $340 per pupil. We had 6,980 funded pupil count projected. That's based on our demographer and based on reducing that demographer's projection, again, by 2%. So that could be overly conservative. It could be. But when I do the math to see how much, not having that 2%, extra 2% in there from the demographer, you're talking a couple $100,000 is what that would mean. So it's not going to be a big difference in the overall budget. Yes.
Question. Okay, they passed the full-day kindergarten. So all the years we didn't get money for our full-day kindergarten, now are we going to be like ahead because now we'll be getting compensated? For all those
The full-day
kids?
kindergarten, when I got in there and I really looked at what that does for us, in my opinion, we end up losing money
Oh,
because we were already fully funded
right.
through e-care slots. But we were also receiving funding at .08, so the 0.08 goes away, and the hold harmless funding, which we were receiving in addition, also goes away, and that was about $360,000. So those things together,
Hurt us.
it just didn't end up being. So what I will say though is there is a grant opportunity around furniture and fixtures that can be used for kindergarten and preschool. And that's, I want to say, about $250,000, and that should be coming to you in the next board meeting, where we've actually submitted some of that paperwork, but to apply for that, and I would expect that's, we'll get that. So that's a decision that's out there now to say, and that would be within the grant fund is where that money would be available. But that's a decision out there now, is to say, how do we want to spend this $250,000, which was originally presented as implementation funds around full-day kinder, and it's now there to buy furniture or fixtures for kindergarten or preschool. But I think that there's some flexibility in what we can use that money for, so that's a decision ahead of us.
Mr. Storrs, on that point, because we were funding our full-day kindergarten with e-care slots, is it possible to redirect those e-care slots to increase the offering for preschool?
Yes, and I think we have done that as much as we thought we possibly could, I think would be the way to say that. We have built in our preschool fund both a revenue and an expense number, which are sort of contingency. So with the hope that, if we're able to expand and offer maybe more full-day slots, that we get more students, and we can add teachers as they come, with that already being within our budget to do that. The flip side of that is, we need to be very careful there, because if that doesn't materialize, so at the same time, like, we're not the only ones in this category. So if that doesn't materialize, we don't want to be overstaffed ahead of time. So I do think that's going to be something we need to watch carefully as we go into next year, to make sure that we're staffed appropriately in preschool. So the overall increase in the School Finance Act funding is about $1.9 million, and most of that being in property taxes is how we'll receive it. State equalization will stay about flat, a slight decrease, and then again, under categorical, I'm just noting that was increased since the last time we met, about $200,000 related to that ECA funding. On the expenditure assumptions, these are, kind of the things that had to be built into salaries and benefits. We had a 5% COLA this year, or an equivalent amount for classified. Our benefits, the amount of the benefit cost that we picked up increased about 4%. We accounted for benefits, including accounting for when people decline benefits. So that had been something in the past where maybe we over budgeted and had money dedicated to that when it could have been put somewhere else. So we've tried to be a little bit better, more accurate there. And then we've also assumed about $500,000 in a vacancy savings, which is a little bit different than anything I think we've done before. So we're saying we know some positions won't be filled this year. And we've turned around and said, within our balanced budget, we've taken that out, even though we have people in those seats right now. And that was based on looking at, 3-year averaging and trying to say, what do we think that vacancy savings rate is, and trying to be well below all of the last 3 years, and trying to put out a number which we think we won't miss. And then I'm just noting the purchase services are increasing here, and that's, related to the MGT contract. Supplies and materials, we maintained an $800,000 curriculum budget in the general fund this year. And then in the transfers, something that's new this year compared to last year is we have to make a transfer out of the general fund into the COP payment fund to make that payment on the COPs half that we used as the ALSUP match. So that number's about, exactly, $489,351, and that's, something that if we were able to pay off those COPs, that would go away. So as a future consideration. And then again, just on the transfer from athletics, to note that was increased 40,000.
Mr. Storch, I have a question. The 4.9 million that was approved by the citizens of this district, could you give a breakdown to that $4.9 million, music, art, I believe, technology, and is it PE? It's PE, I believe, those
Sounds
four.
right.
And I believe it was about 4.9 million. So you said that you transferred 40,000 of the music uniforms to the PE fund, but I'm trying to figure out how is this $4.9 million broken down to far as a district-wide? If the citizens of Commerce City approved this 4.9, how is it that you determine that 40,000 should go to this particular account? Shouldn't it be a certain percentage broken down to the high school, both middle schools, on down to the preschools? Because if it's music, art, PE, and technology, at 4.9 should come to the district every year, correct?
It does, yes.
And, but if I'm not mistaken, you didn't bring that to us, the board, and how y'all was gonna break that down, the 4.9. You just told us 40,000. So I'm just asking, could you tell us in this budget, how did that 4.9 get broken down? Because I'm hearing a lot of, for myself, negative, we can't do this, we can't do that, we can't do this. I'm not sure we're gonna do this, but if the citizens of Commerce City approve 4.9 every year for a category of 4 different things for the students of Adams 14, we should have not students come in front of in front of this dais telling us they don't have uniforms. This thing should be, and we're talking about the budget. So how's it broken down? I'm sure you should be able to tell us this, right?
Yeah, I didn't bring any sort of a breakdown tonight related to that, so if that's something you would like prepared, I can certainly prepare that if you would like to see that.
Do you have any, can you, off the top of your head, what the 4.9 went to?
You know, I would not want to try to put out some numbers which are not going to be accurate. What I would say is that the way that 4.9 million has been utilized, I think for the last about 4, maybe 5 years, has been that has been encompassed within the general fund. We used to have a separate fund, Fund 12, and we used to put the 4.9 million into Fund 12. And then within that Fund 12, it would track exactly how that was spent. So about, and I'm sorry, I don't know the year, that Fund 12 was dissolved, and the 4.9 million was put into the general fund as a revenue, which it is in the general fund as a revenue here. And the reasoning at that time why that was done was because when it was analyzed, not by me, was that in technology, in PE, in music, in art, in those things, that we spend more than the 4.9 million. So if the board would like a additional analysis now to look back and say, where are we? Is that still true? I would need to go and, take some time to prepare that.
What would it take? Like you said, you had a separate account, 12? Would it be impossible to create that again and put that 4.9 to utilize it where it's supposed to be?
No, it wouldn't be impossible. I do think it would take a good amount of work.
Oh.
So we would need to go through and capture, every piece of cost, which is kind of that category, which is now, mixed within a department budget or a school budget, and pull it back out and then put it into that separate fund. It could be done, but it would take a good amount of work.
Because if I ain't mistaken, board policy states that any money that's moved from one account to another account is supposed to get board approval. Is that correct?
My understanding is that's by fund, so if it moves between funds, fund transfers need to be approved. Account level transfers happen frequently.
Yeah, they do.
Do they get board approval?
I don't believe that's a requirement to transfer from at an account level.
Okay.
And I think that would be pretty cumbersome. The way that we allocate money out to schools, frequently they'll have budgeted items as a supply, and then the proper accounting treatment of that item is actually as equipment. So if we were to, have that as a board policy, there would be quite a number of, I imagine most of the board meeting would be discussing those items.
So, just an example, because we're talking about the budget. So, someone in your department can take $30,000 out of maintenance and put it in another department. And if that department calls you and say, hey, you took $30,000 out my department without my permission, but it was budgeted for me at the beginning of the year, and you took it out, say, a week ago at the end of the year to put it in another department, and they question you on that, and then you say, I'll put it back I'll put it back in that department, I'll put it back in your department. That's not board policy.
I'm not aware of a board policy that would be violating. And, there was a, circumstance, if not exactly what you're discussing, very similar to what you're discussing, which did occur, where I believe it's the maintenance budget, overran its budget. And in my discussions with Sean before he left, as the head of operations, we said the way to address that would be to make that transfer, which I did. And if I don't make that transfer, then within that particular budget, as bills come due, we're unable to pay them, even though you may have another budget which is underspent where the money is available. So, however, when I spoke with the person in charge of that budget where the money was taken, and in hearing his concerns, I felt that might not be the right way to have addressed that issue, and that wouldn't be related. I think it was actually grounds, that the grounds budget would need that money, and so I did put that money back and took it from somewhere else in the general fund in order to be able to pay the bills that were already due in that maintenance department.
Carry on.
So this slide is showing what we estimate to be the beginning fund balance starting next year. And again, that's an estimated number. And then our revenue and our expenditures, and the difference there, again, being mostly the MGT contract, and ending at about 15.2 million. This is a presentation of the risk fund, which you might have also heard it called the Special Programs, Risk-Related Activity Fund. So this is where we're budgeting insurance. And this is where we've seen communication from SIDSIP saying, rates across the state are going up, and we're showing an increase here. And so that's causing us to need to make a larger transfer into this fund. Our special revenue funds. That's nutrition services, the grant fund, the athletic fund, the fee-supported fund. The nutrition fund, I think we've talked about before, but we're showing that going from about a $700,000 beginning fund balance down to 318. I did see some good numbers as far as the revenue coming in the last couple months there, and so maybe that will be reflected in the next year as well if there's some change there. But I think that's always one to keep an eye on about whether or not we need a fee there. The second fund you see here, that second column, is the grants fund, and this is going to include federal, state, and local grants, and the federal grants including Title, IDEA, Medicaid would be one that's there. Impact aid is not. Impact aid is recorded in the general fund, so that's a federal grant which we record in the general fund. It's kind of a different presentation on that one. I think that's because the use of that is not restricted in the same way. And the fee-supported fund goes from about 152,000 down to 109,000. That's just us spending down some of the money, which one of the items there I would kind of highlight is the facility use fees that we're collecting. There is some money available in the fee-supported fund to do capital improvements, and we had discussed that, and this number I'm talking about is something like 70,000.
For the facility use funds?
This is revenue which has been facility use, which has been put into this fund and has been kind of not offset by expenses, and so it's available in a way to be spent on facility use, say improvements to the athletic fields, but that'd be a kind of a decision ahead of us about how would that money be used. But it's in this budget as like equipment or property. And this is just showing the debt service schedule related to the bonds. I didn't include a slide here, but it is in the full budget document for the COP fund, similar to this, showing the required payments we have to make both on the bond and the COP. The capital projects building fund here, and not on this slide, but on this slide, when we met last time, you may remember that we had a number down in contingency that was very big. It was like 600,000, and that kind of struck me as I was reading it, even just that night. I went back to what had been prepared by Sean before he left to try and understand what was the plan on how that was going to be used. And there was some things that I had in contingency which are actually other things. So this is the copier lease at $225,000 was shown in contingency, and I've now shown it out as the copier lease. This was $50,000, which was on the schedule as 4 marquees. So I've shown it here as 4 marquees. And in my discussions with operations now, I understand we're working on about a $30,000 project for KMS to get a new marquee.
This budget doesn't show, in previous budgets, Mr. Storch, you had 18, 19. capital projects to show us what has not been done to carry over to this year. But you didn't have that in this budget. And I think I sent the email questioning that. I sent the email with a lot of stuff I was asking about the budget. And I didn't get a response back.
I guess what I would say I was not asked to respond to that, but.
To my, you was asked not to respond to my email?
Right.
By who?
I don't know if I want to name names, right? I mean, is that the discussion?
You're fine.
Okay.
Don't.
But the answer to your question is, I did see the email, and the answer to your question is, when you see the full, this is just the slides that I'm presenting here. And so when you see the full budget document posted online, it does show the 1819 and then 1920 next to it. Then this presentation here is showing what showed as adopted budget carry forward in that first column there. Those are items which were in the prior year, not, money that was budgeted and then not spent, and is now moving forward. So technology of 461,000 and a contingency of 150,000, which I think was largely created by savings on the asphalt project. And then safety equipment at about 256,000. And the last thing I want to point out there is just under safety here in the 1920 budget, we do have 50,000, which I believe is for carpeting at Rose Hill. That's that 50,000, which was also previously shown in contingency.
Well, was the carpet supposed to be done this year, right?
I'm sorry, I can't speak to when it was supposed to be done.
Because
I can tell you that we had the discussion this morning that at least at the preliminary stage, from here forward, there's no reason why they can't move forward to do that project. That
Okay, so they can.
but it's 1920. The carpet was supposed to be done on the 1819 school budget. This carpet in Rose Hill Library. Not this 1920. The carpet was supposed to be done on the 1819 capital reserve budget. Correct?
I can go back and try to research that and see if I've got that out of category here.
No, because Mr. Leo is here, and if I am mistaken, that was on last year's 1819 budget,
But,
the carpet.
but we still are in 1819 school year, so they could still,
June 31st.
yeah.
School's been out for how long? So school been out for how long? The carpet should have been taken care of in the library because ain't nobody there. If the 50,000 is supposed to have been done for this year, you putting it on this year's budget. So,
I think the best thing I can say is we do have it budgeted to move forward, and I can't really speak to why that hadn't started previously.
So, are you in charge? Okay, can you help Eddie?
Eddie and I just discussed that this morning about this project right here. So that was money earmarked for, among these, I don't know, where'd that slide go? The previous slide? There you go. These are funds that are set aside, well, as I understand it, these funds are set aside for the coming year, 1920, not the current year. So that project requires abatement, and I'm collecting 3 quotes right now. I have one. I'm collecting 3 quotes. It's going to require, because of its cost, approval by the board, which I can present during our next board meeting.
Okay.
And that may have been, it may have been, fully intended to be done in this year. On that point, absolutely. And how, if I am to sort of put myself in Sean's shoes, how he may have envisioned doing that is by using what is shown as contingency dollars here.
But I feel like I'm going back and forth. I sent the email to get questions asked, and I'm just finding out that somebody told a board member not to answer my question. So that right there then got me hot. But I'm not finna take it out on you, Eddie. And now I know for a fact that 50,000 was supposed to get Rose Hill, because Rose Hill is my school. That it was supposed to get done because of the library. Now they didn't pushed it back to this year. And what else in contingency, and that's the question I had asked in my email, was normally the 18 and 19 previous years I didn't sat on this dais, capital reserves is beside it, so you'll see you can match which is which, who had what, and it goes to the next year. But I didn't see it, but you're telling me that I need to go look at something else for something else. That ain't how the budget was ran. Just like I asked about how come the school's budgets is not, each school budget was in the, for the couple of years, telling us everything one by one, what was going on in each school budget. You don't see that. Seemed like everything I didn't ask on this dais, this staff has not done it, and it seemed like somebody didn't say, don't answer Mr. Thomas's questions. But nobody's telling Mr. Thomas, and I'm looking like a fool up here asking questions, so I should know this.
I obviously do not want you to feel like we're unresponsive to your questions. So I was prepared to just discuss about a different, one of the issues that I think is coming up here. And if you look back 2 years, 3 years, we prepared, and this would have been, if I go out online and I pull up the budget document 3 years ago, there'll be a budget book, and that budget book will have a breakdown by program, it will have a breakdown by department, it will have a breakdown by school. And that was done in September, and it was submitted to ASBO, Association for School Business Officials. It was submitted to Government Finance Officers Association, and we received an award for doing that. It was like the Meritus Budget Award, I think is what it was called. You may have saw that. And completing that budget book is about, I want to say 250 pages. It's very big. And last year, with, from previous supervisor and the superintendent at the time, the decision was made that is, the time commitment needed to complete that budget book wasn't one that we could fulfill. That it takes a lot of time to compile that budget, and typically in the fall at the same time we're doing the financial audit. And so the decision was made at that time to not do that budget book. And, I am a proponent for the ASBO award and the GFOA and the information which you're referring to in that document. I think that's a great presentation and a way to look at that data. It is very time consuming to put that together. So when you look too at the number of schools, school districts which do that, it's a handful which complete that budget to that budget book specification per GFOA, and ASBO. So as we're making that transition from this presentation to another presentation, if there are other ways that the board would like to see data, I am happy to provide that data in a different format or in a different presentation. Although, if the instruction is to provide it in that same budget book format, then that's a pretty big time commitment.
Do you think you could, like, maybe start it for next year? Because I know I used to pick up that book.
Yes.
It's very helpful to have that book.
I would say, given the right resources to do that, we can certainly do it. Yes.
Okay.
And I guess to get back to this budget timeline, so we're now on, it's actually June 11th, right? And this is the public hearing. And I think I'm off a day as well on that last board meeting. There is June, I think it's 25th, when we need to adopt this budget. And this list is, again, just some of the things I have kind of highlighted in preparing the budget now as challenges that I see out there. So managing and mitigating declining enrollment, I think, is a serious challenge for the district, and understanding exactly what that will be. The capital projects funding, which I think you heard in the survey, I think the survey results there and where we head with the master facility plan, hopefully addressing these items. The technology refresh cycle, this is talking about Chromebooks and the Chromebook refresh cycle, that we need to look at the amount of money we're transferring from the general fund to the capital reserve fund, and whether or not that's going to maintain the Chromebooks that we have out there. And same would go for buses. So we did include buses in the budget now as it's been presented here. Additional leases of buses, which I think you'll, if it's not on the agenda tonight, is coming in the next week. And then nutrition fees, I would note again, and then talking about these contingency amounts, which we discussed, the $4 million, and there's also reserves both in the risk fund and that contingency amount sitting in the capital reserve fund there, that I think just getting solid definition around what we want those numbers to be, I think is would be a pretty big positive in moving forward. So.
Any questions?
Are there some questions?
If I ask a question, it won't get answered no way, so I'm just going to sit here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Storts.
Thanks.
Okay, yeah. So I need to know, does anybody in the audience have any questions regarding the budget? Go ahead. Yes, you may.
I didn't know you guys wanted me to come up here. But I was just wondering if you guys have, so I talked with BJ Maldonado today with Ms. Bowie, the band teacher, and she said that you guys were looking at the companies that Ms. Bowie sent to BJ, and then she emailed it to you guys, and I'm sorry, I'm nervous.
No, it's just, you gotta get closer.
Sorry. And if you guys have, I lost my train of thought.
Uniforms?
I've been looking into like a certain company, because if we make a decision right now, we could get it by the middle of the season.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Mr.
So I think in the last Friday updates that we received, there were a number of, they're soliciting bids from a number of companies. I actually didn't, it was news to me that uniforms are actually so expensive. But we obviously did, this budget does include a $40,000 allocation to pay that expense. And so I'm not sure, I would defer obviously to the Adams City High School administration on what the timeline is, but I know that they are soliciting bids and looking at that.
So it would be up to the staff to look at the bids and hopefully get the cheapest one, on around $40,000.
Yeah, I think. Ooh, sorry, you scared me.
We have submitted the bids already. We don't know what budget it's coming out of. That's what we're waiting on. And we did meet with Lauren, Ms. Maldonado and I did today, and we haven't heard back as to what budget that's coming out of.
Get with Mr. Stortz, because we already approved that.
Okay,
Okay?
thank you.
Good evening, School Board. I'm sorry, I was sitting in the audience here, and I have a question. How does a question by the Vice President and also handles the Treasury, right, Mr. Thomas, is that what you do, or is that Mr. Rolla? Well, how does the board, any member of the board ask a question and someone else tells them not to answer? How does that happen? I don't understand. I mean, I would take it home and think about it. How does it just go where he said, I have it, and he said, well, somebody told me not to answer? How is that okay?
See, but right now, we're talking about the budget.
Right, and that's what you
the
asked.
questions have to, like, if you have questions about the budget,
Uh-huh.
not about the conversation that just happened.
Oh, so this
So
is on
you
a
could do
different-
that in comments.
Okay,
So,
all right, I'll be back
Okay.
up then.
thank you. Anybody else? What's her name? Lecrea's mom. That's how I know you. Doreen. I know you, but
Yeah, it's Doreen Armstrong.
Armelin, I was going to use a different.
Thanks for letting me know, Dominic, I appreciate it.
No, I know who you are. But can you write that out and hand it in to Monica, and we will get that answered
Sure.
for you?
A timeline would be,
Probably as soon as you can, before we meet with the next board meeting. So
no,
we-
and then a timeline for the answer. Like, I'll get it for you tonight.
as soon as she gets it, she'll give it to the right people
Okay,
to answer that,
okay, I can do
okay?
that. Mhm.
And she'll get back with you on it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So if there's no, do you have something else? So if there's no other questions, I would like to declare this budget public hearing closed. So. And right now, we're going to move on with business routine items. 1.0, personnel. She didn't give me any, so. 1.1, superintendent's recommendation, personnel actions. May I have a motion?
Madam Chair, I move to approve item 1.1 under consent items.
May I have a second?
I second.
Any discussion?
Yes. I'm pulling number 28.
So you want to amend? Number 28.
Madam Chair, I move to approve item 1.1, superintendent's recommendation on routine items with the exception of item 28.
May I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion on that? None? Monica, roll call?
Ms. Martinez? Aye. Mr. Moreno?
Aye.
Mrs. Quintana?
Aye.
Mr. Rolla?
Aye.
Mr. Thomas?
Aye.
Moving on to business.
Other, 1.0, 1.1. Superintendent's recommendation, approval to renew Infinite Campus Student Information System subscription. May I have a motion?
Madam Chair, I move to approve item 1.1.
May I have a second?
Madam Chair, I second item 1.1.
Any discussion? Seeing none, Monica, roll call.
Ms. Martinez?
Aye.
Mr. Moreno?
Aye.
Mrs. Quintana?
Aye.
Mr. Rolla?
Aye.
Mr. Thomas?
Aye.
Moving on to 1.2, Superintendent's recommendation, approval to purchase a new engine replacement per policy. May I have a motion?
Madam Chair, I move to approve item 1.2.
May I have a second?
Madam Chair, I second item 1.2.
Discussion? Seeing none, Monica, roll call.
Ms. Martinez?
Aye.
Mr. Moreno?
Aye.
Mrs. Quintana?
Aye.
Mr. Rolla?
Aye.
Mr. Thomas?
Aye.
Moving on to 1.3, Superintendent's recommendation, approval for in-state overnight travel to attend the Colorado Association of Schools Executives Convention in Breckenridge from July 23rd to the 26th, 2019. May I have a motion?
Madam Chair, I move to approve item 1.3.
May I have a second?
Madam Chair, I second item 1.3.
Discussion? Seeing none, Monica, roll call.
Ms. Martinez?
Aye.
Mr. Moreno?
Aye.
Mrs. Quintana?
Aye.
Mr. Rolla?
Aye.
Mr. Thomas?
Aye.
Moving on to 1.4, Superintendent's recommendation, approval to purchase copy paper from Lewis. May I have a motion?
Madam Chair, I move for the approval of item 1.4.
May I have a second?
Madam Chair, I second item 1.4.
Any discussion?
I just had a question. How is this different? It says here that we have to buy by the truckloads. How is this different with our current provider, and can we do a truckload with them?
Mr. Stortsville.
My understanding is that we do currently buy by truckload when possible. But we were just projecting here, that we would do that again and buy 2.5 approximately truckloads from this point forward to get to the end of next year.
And my understanding is those truckloads go to the distribution center.
That's
Am I
right.
correct? And when we want to pull some in, we just order from there.
Right.
So,
Thank you.
may I have a roll call, Monica?
Ms. Martinez?
Aye.
Mr. Moreno?
Aye.
Mrs. Quintana?
Aye.
Mr. Rolla?
Aye.
Mr. Thomas?
Aye.
Moving on to 1.5, Superintendent's recommendation, approval for in-state overnight travel to Loveland for the Colorado Association for Career and Technical Education Conference from July 14th through the 18th, 2019. May I have a motion?
Madam Chair, I move for the approval of item 1.5.
May I have a second?
I second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, Monica, roll call.
Ms. Martinez?
Aye.
Mr. Moreno?
Aye.
Mrs. Quintana?
Aye.
Mr. Rolla?
Aye.
Mr. Thomas?
Aye.
Moving on to 1.6, Superintendent's recommendation, approval of the 2019-2020 preschool student calendar. May I have a motion?
Madam Chair, I move for the approval of item 1.6.
May I have a second?
I second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, Monica, roll call, please.
Ms. Martinez?
Aye.
Mr. Moreno?
Aye.
Mrs. Quintana?
Aye.
Mr. Rolla?
Aye.
Mr. Thomas?
Aye.
Moving on to 1.7, Superintendent's recommendation, approval for conversion of 4.0 classified full-time employees to 2.0 support and tech full-time employees for the position of student engagement coordinator beginning the 2019-2020 school year. May I have a motion?
Madam Chair, I move for the approval of item 1.7.
May I have a second?
Madam Chair, I second item 1.7.
Discussion?
Madam Chair, I do have just a couple of quick questions about this one. So it looks like the conversion will come from 4 FTE and the attendance liaison. I'm just curious, how many attendance liaison FTEs do we currently have, and how will that impact
Jeffers?
any operations for attendance?
Currently, there are 4 attendance liaisons. Evidently, it's not working. Our attendance has gone down to 85% from 87.8%, and it's not working. Those 4 paras, well, with the exception of 1, have been placed in other positions, so we're not losing it. But I'm trying to align our campus monitors with this position, with the dean's position, and admin to bring in more parents on this absenteeism, and it goes along with the SARB that we were talking about, the student attendance review panel. We're trying to get a municipality judge in there to do a truancy court once a month, so they would help bringing in the families and stuff to see if we can't get that attendance into the 90th percentile.
So, Mr. Jeffers, if I'm just making sure I want to understand correctly, so the duties formerly for the attendance liaisons will be distributed amongst the campus monitors, some for these student engagement coordinators. Everyone will kind of all be responsible for increasing attendance?
That is correct. Currently, I'm using 2 of the campus monitors, and we go out into the neighborhood and bring our kids back that are truant. And that goes above and beyond what a security officer at a school does. So we're out there actually looking for them and bringing them back in, making immediate phone calls to parents, and setting up conferences, including administration.
You know, years ago, we used to have,
Truancy officer.
well, we had a community liaison, and that person did that. They went out looking for these people, going to the homes.
With 1,700 students,
Yeah.
we need some added help.
So,
We need to go beyond the phone call.
right, and that was the purpose they did, was to go to the home. I know, because I was an attendance liaison, so I made
Need a
those.
job, Ms. Quintana?
I did. I did, except for one time, well, that's off the subject, but yeah, so, I was just concerned because it's 2 is going to be converted to another position, and the other 2?
They've been placed at paras in this, 1 left to transportation, 2 of them took another para position within the school, and we're still waiting on the 4th one to see what she wants to do.
Okay.
Now that you said that all 4 have been placed in different places, are you, these 2 new positions will be, they're vacant currently, and so you're going to be looking for outside people, or?
Not necessarily. We might have the people within our own district already. It entails a lot more responsibility.
It's a big job.
It is a big job, but admin, I'll be closely involved in that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
May I have a roll call, Monica?
Ms. Martinez?
Aye.
Mr. Moreno?
Aye.
Mrs. Quintana?
Aye.
Mr. Rolla?
Aye.
Mr. Thomas?
Aye.
Moving on to 1.8, Superintendent's recommendation, approval for district to use general funds to purchase food/beverages for the 2019-2020 employee rally. May I have a motion?
Madam Chair, I move for the approval of item 1.8.
May I have a second?
Madam Chair, I second item 1.8.
Discussion? Seeing none? Monica, roll call.
Ms. Martinez?
Aye.
Mr. Moreno?
Aye.
Mrs. Quintana?
Aye.
Mr. Rolla?
Aye.
Mr. Thomas?
Aye.
Moving on to 1.9, Superintendent's recommendation, approval for district to use general funds to purchase food beverages for district-wide teacher professional development on August 5th and 6th, 2019. May I have a motion?
Madam Chair, I move for the approval of item 1.9.
May I have a second?
Madam Chair, I second item 1.9.
Any discussion? Monica, roll call, please.
Ms. Martinez?
Aye.
Mr. Moreno?
Aye.
Mrs. Quintana?
Aye.
Mr. Rolla?
Aye.
Mr. Thomas?
Aye.
Moving on to 1.10,
Superintendent's recommendation, approval for in-state overnight travel to Colorado Springs to attend the CPI Nonviolent Crisis Intervention Training on June 24th through the 27th, 2019. May I have a motion?
Madam Chair, I move for the approval of item 1.10.
May I have a second?
Madam Chair, I second item 1.10.
Discussion?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Who are the two district employees going to this conference?
I don't have the names of the individuals, but I do know that one of them is a behavior specialist, and another one is a SPED teacher, I believe.
That, Dr. Patterson, that's not helping me. That said, we sending two individuals. That could be two individual titles in this whole district, and I'm sure we got more than one behavior specialist and one SPED teacher, special ed teacher in this district. So every other conference that's in this agenda today has the list of names of each individual who's going to their conference. And I know you're not over this department, so where's the department chair at?
She's not here tonight.
Ms. Moore, as acting superintendent, do you know who the individuals is going?
No, I don't have particular names, but I do know that Ms. Shea Carter is on vacation currently. That was approved back in March, so she made arrangements to have coverage for tonight, but I don't have the specific names. We can certainly get that to you first thing in the morning. I can even text her now.
This was pulled in March. This conference was pulled in March.
No, I meant her vacation was approved in March. So, yeah, but I can certainly text her right now and see if she'll let me know the names of those individuals. Maybe she has them, and that wasn't a detail that we got for tonight.
So, Ms. Moore, Ms. Patterson, whoever can answer, I was just curious, and I know there's been some back and forth on this agenda item, and, you know, it was pulled off because then we realized there's actually a conference opportunity here, which will save the district money, which is wonderful. I was just curious, though, that the amount that we said not to exceed by $9,100 seems high for an in-state conference, given, I mean, I made the comparison between the CASE conference and the conference in Loveland, and for two people, it seems really high. I wonder if maybe we just forgot to update that amount when that was estimated, the cost to be when it was out of state versus in-state, so I'm just curious about that.
Monica had already given me a heads up that there was a question there. Normally, the supervisor has a worksheet that they fill out that identifies, because I've filled them out myself as supervisor of a department, and you fill out that worksheet, and that puts the number together. I asked if we require that worksheet also come forward as part of their superintendent rec request, and my understanding is we don't. That probably should be something we do require, given that you're asking these questions, and the sup rec that came forward didn't provide us that detail. But I do know if it's an error and it was too much, obviously, we wouldn't spend that much on it. But I don't know that specifics. I apologize.
Thank you. Monica, roll call.
Ms. Martinez?
I'm sorry, I'm still trying to understand. Can we make changes to this once we know the individuals? I just want to make sure that the two people that do go, I know you said behavior specialists and SPED, that they are, well, if they're going to be in the same area, or how is this training going to help them? So that's why I just wanted to see if can get the names. And I don't know why, I'm a little bit hesitant to approve it without the names.
So my understanding of CPI training is that, and I do know about, I had some information for the original request that was out of state, and that CPI training, my understanding was a train the trainers model, and it was an out-of-state conference, so it cost a lot of money to go through CPI training, and because it's very high level, it's very nuanced, it's very technical, and you get a certification. In order to get that kind of certification, it usually costs you quite a bit more. And I believe the out-of-state one was to train the trainer model so that the person that went could come back and then train all of our people, or the 2 people that went would come back and then train our people here on CPI restraint. So I'm making an assumption that the in-state model is the same, and that the CPI training for this in-state conference, because it was in lieu of the out-of-state conference, is the same model, that it's to have these 2 individuals go, and then they come back and they are certified now, and then they train the rest of the special education staff.
Ms. Moore, if you, because we won't have another board meeting before this conference actually occurs, I do think it's important we take action on this request tonight. But if you could, maybe in our Friday updates, just follow up with the actual
Names.
Okay.
well, the actual names and the actual
Details.
expense of the conference, that'd be helpful.
Okay.
Thanks.
I think we'd have a problem if you approved 90, a certain amount, and then we needed more than that. If that amount is, but I don't think that's the issue. I think if that amount is too high, we certainly wouldn't spend that. Okay.
Monica, may I have roll call?
Ms. Martinez?
Aye.
Mr. Moreno?
Aye.
Mrs. Quintana?
Aye.
Mr.
Aye.
Mr. Rolla?
Aye.
Mr. Thomas?
No.
Moving on to 1.11, Superintendent's recommendation, approval for the license renewal of Learning Ally, which provides access to the audiobooks with fiction, nonfiction, as well as textbooks for students with reading deficiencies. May I have a motion?
Madam Chair, I move for the approval of item 1.11.
May I have a second?
Madam Chair, I second item 1.11.
Discussion?
Just had one question. What grades does this program offer to?
K-12.
Is this only at school, or do they have access to this outside of school?
From what I read and what I gathered, it's access here at school.
Thank you.
That's it. Thank you.
Okay, Monica, roll call?
Ms. Martinez?
Aye.
Mr. Moreno?
Aye.
Mrs. Quintana?
Aye.
Mr. Rolla?
Aye.
Mr. Thomas?
Aye.
Moving on to 1.12, Superintendent's recommendation, approval to contract with Nationalities Interpretation Services to provide interpreting and translation services for Adams 14 School District for the 2019-2020 school year. May I have a motion?
Madam Chair, I move for the approval of item 1.12.
May I have a second?
Madam Chair, I second item 1.12.
Discussion? Seeing none, Monica, roll call?
Ms. Martinez?
Aye.
Mr. Moreno?
Aye.
Mrs. Quintana?
Aye.
Mr. Rolla?
Aye.
Mr. Thomas?
Aye.
Moving on to 1.13, Superintendent's recommendation, approval to contract with Cedar Crest Hospital, Texas, to provide educational interventions for students with significant emotional disabilities for the 2019-2020 school year. May I have a motion?
Madam Chair, I move for the approval of item 1.13.
May I have a second?
I second.
Discussion? Seeing none, Monica, roll call.
Ms. Martinez?
Aye.
Mr. Moreno?
Aye.
Mrs. Quintana?
Aye.
Mr. Rolla?
Aye.
Mr. Thomas?
Aye.
Moving on to 1.14, Superintendent's recommendation, approval to contract with Savio House Facility to provide educational interventions for students with significant emotional disabilities for the 2019-2020 school year. May I have a motion?
Madam Chair, I move for the approval of item 1.14.
May I have a second?
I second.
Discussion? Seeing none, roll call, Monica?
Ms. Martinez?
Aye.
Mr. Moreno?
Aye.
Mrs. Quintana?
Aye.
Mr. Rolla?
Aye.
Mr. Thomas?
Aye.
Oh, yeah. So, we need to yet discuss how we pulled on personnel the number 28. So, do we need to amend, or what?
Not sure if there's questions.
Do you have questions on that, Harvest?
Yes.
Okay, go
Good.
ahead.
Do you want me to make a motion first?
Yeah, go ahead.
We're gonna do it out here, because it ain't can't have no executive session
No,
in
we
that
can't.
person. Gotta ask them, do you want it out here or executive session?
Right, he gets to choose.
So,
Yeah, so you can ask them.
So on item number 28 under personnel, I believe there is questions and some board discussion. My understanding is that that's always the
Procedure.
determination
Yeah.
of the employee about whether they want it conducted in open session versus executive session. So I would defer to Ms. Moore or Mr. Rodriguez on that
Mr. Bold.
question.
Okay, I will, if I have a minute, to consult with him, but I also want to let you know I got a text from Shay Carter, and she said that the two people going, Sarah Neiman, who's the special ed coordinator, and Paula Avis, who's the IEP compliance specialist, are the two individuals. And then I also sent her a text if the 9,100 is a correct amount. So she said that it's in Colorado Springs, but the training itself is about 3,100 per person. So that's the expense. It is a little higher because, as I talked about, it's that certification program that's highly technical and legal. Okay?
Thank you, and be sure to tell Ms. Carter thank you for responding on her vacation.
Mr. Rodriguez would prefer executive session.
Okay, and I would like Mr. Bold to come in with us. I'd like to have a motion to move in to talk with personnel.
Madam Chair, I move to proceed into executive session
For 1.1.
to discuss item number 28
Yeah, on personnel.
under personnel. I'm not sure what the statutory citation is, Monica, but I don't know if you need that for the motion.
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Let's see. I don't have anything with it. Okay, that is CRS 24-6-402, parentheses 4, parentheses B, legal advice, board to conference with,
It's not legal advice.
no, personnel.
Yeah.
Sorry, my computer just died. It's F, personnel.
F, personnel, with Ms. Moore.
Madam Chair, I move to proceed into executive session pursuant to CRS 24-6-402 402, paren 4, paren F, personnel.
And we would second it.
Second.
Discussion? None?
Yes.
Oh.
I would like to, before we move into executive session, I would like to say, let's finish the agenda. And that would leave with communication.
Yeah.
And, because we may stay hours, 2 hours in there, never know. This way, the rest of the individuals here wouldn't have to wait around to hear the communication.
I withdraw the motion, Madam Chair.
Okay. So next, we're going to move into communication. And starting with Laura.
I just wanted to say that I attended the IP2 training, the International Association for Public Participation, and I'm really excited to start working with the community and several members of the district that attended the training as well. And I'm positive that this new training will help us be aligned and work as one. So thank you, John, for bringing this organization and allowing us to train as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Senator, nothing? Mr. Rowland?
Just wanted to thank Mr. Poynton for that leadership conference that you held, and all I heard was nothing but positive from a lot of the staff members and community. So, once again, thank you.
Mr. Thomas?
I just want to thank everybody for coming tonight, and I just realized I am going to run for this open seat for the Board of Education, one of the 4 open seats, this come November. Thank you.
And I do have one item to discuss. It says, does the board want to sponsor Rotary Golf Tournament that raises funds to provide scholarships for Adams 14 students on July 26th? And here is the paper.
Yeah.
At what level? $750 is for the annual contribution, and it gets a foursome.
Madam Chair, I recommend that we sponsor the Rotary Golf Tournament at the $750 level.
I would like to remind the board, and I know Dominic hasn't been on, Laura, but we have always sponsored 2. So we have, and I would like to keep it as 2, because as the Rotary, they give for every individual that they give a scholarship to, it's a total of $12,000. And I think to invest here, so I'd like to see 2 teams put in.
So that 4 people then?
No, 8.
8.
But for 2, but for
So-
750.
We've done this before.
Right.
Right. And you've always gotten the 8, am I correct?
What's that?
You've always gotten the 8 people.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, plenty. I don't know, Mr. Poynton may have something to say.
Madam Chair and members of the board, I heard today from MGT that they may very well be interested in sponsoring along with you. So that's another, they've expressed interest in that. Mr. Traviesa attended the recent Rotary meeting and wants to be very supportive of that enterprise.
Okay. So we have a consensus up here. So we'll go for 2 teams of 4. Okay. The next item is, we have the 60th annual reunion that we usually have in, isn't it the Pioneer Park, Monica? No, this is the Adams City High School reunion.
Adams City and Union High School.
It'll be held at Adams City High School alumni event being held on June 30th. Please fill out the form and return it to Monica if you do. But there's also on June 13th, correct me if I'm wrong, Monica, they're having the picnic at the, have we looked into that, Mr. Poynton?
That one's up north. We usually
Huh?
don't participate in the
It's
one.
June 13th.
It's gonna
We
be
don't
up north.
participate in the one up north.
She said it's gonna be up north.
Oh,
Yeah, this is the end of,
okay.
the one here on Pioneer is,
No,
it's like in August, I believe.
Well, I mean, they did put it out there, so anybody can go to it if they want. The one out north.
Yeah.
Yeah, they can go. So they are going to have a community picnic out north tomorrow, the 13th. So they said you're all invited. So, and I think that's about it. I don't see anything else.
I need the form back tonight if you're attending the reunion.
She need the form back if you going to the reunion.
Oh, no. Okay. Are you going to the reunion, Mr. Rolla? I don't think anybody up here, Monica. Okay, so now we need to go into, do we need to do it again? Okay.
Okay, so now, Madam Chair, I move to proceed into executive session pursuant to 24-6-402, paren 4, paren F, regarding personnel.
It's locked out. Yeah.
Second.
Roll call?
Ms. Martinez?
Aye.
Mr. Moreno?
Aye.
Mrs. Quintana?
Aye.
Mr. Rolla?
Aye.
Mr. Thomas?
Aye.
Okay. We'd like to start the meeting back up at, that clock says 9 o'clock. And I'd like a motion on personnel 1.1, number 28.
Madam Chair, I move for the approval of item number 28 under Personnel Actions Administration.
May I have a second?
I second.
Any discussion? Seeing none. Monica, roll call, please.
Ms. Martinez?
Aye.
Mr. Moreno?
Aye.
Mrs. Quintana?
Aye.
Mr. Rolla?
Aye.
Mr. Thomas?
No.
And that concludes our meeting at 9 o'clock, 9:01. Thank you.